book of that name, Big Sort, identified that, 1973, I think, was the year. Between then and now, though the book was written some years ago, we are slightly more likely to live next door to someone with a different ethnic background, but we are much, much less likely to live next door to somebody with a different political perspective, that we have sorted geographically, politically. Another driver, I would say, is the Southern strategy, that it used to be that that has created a big sort, or lent itself to a big sort politically. We no longer have truly liberal Republicans and truly conservative Democrats. You have a few pro-choice Republicans left in the country, and you have Joe Manchin, who's Democrats, but that overlap is much less than it's been in previous times. So it's, we're less likely to have odd bedfellows in our political coalitions. And I think that is unfortunate. I think another piece of it that you addressed, at least in some part, is the capitalization, the monetization, the marketing of political ideas as economic products. That if you identify that market, you build it up. And I would say, and I do want to be careful, because this has not been symmetrical. There has been, like, MSNBC exists in the world, but this really, in many respects, did start with the growth of those strategies in the early 1970s and the building of institutions that at their essence aren't very pro-democracy, except to the degree at that time that they at least were sort of anti-Russia and anti-communist. They have become no longer anti-Russia as long as Russia is not communist or is pro-Republican. So where the center of it is, where the center of their values are, could be debated. But I understand, I at least have enough thoughts about it. If you have any other drivers you want to share that I'm missing, and you haven't already said, I'm happy to it. I am still, but let me get this question out. You can take me back, but which is fine. But where I am still stuck is, what the heck do we do about it? And I am still stuck. What the heck we do about it, for a number of reasons. One, it gets back to where we were a little bit earlier, which is, if what we do is convince people who love democracy to be less partisan, if what we do is convince people who love democracy to be a little bit nicer, if the takeaway message is, well, make sure that you respect those who you disagree, and your principle, to be clear, is much more specific than that. I don't think it should be misconstrued as that. But if nonetheless, if that, so even setting you aside, if that message reverberates, and by the way, it does, and by the way, that is part of the small L liberal sort of zeitgeist, then how is a team built that will preserve democracy and strengthen democracy? I am still stuck on, I have thoughts, but I'm still stuck on what we do about it. I'd love you to hear your thoughts about what we do about it, but feel free to take us back to pieces we're missing about the puzzle and what got us into this mess.
Okay, sure. So let me do a little bit of both, and then
Please.
So I think the part of the what we do about it question has to be, we have to add something to that question. What do we do about it, given that whatever we do, we have to retain, we have to uphold the democratic ethic? There are all kinds of things we could do about it that just would be inconsistent, right? So I'm a Deweyan in this regard, right? I think that democratic ends require democratic means for their realization. We don't advance democracy by, for just a moment, allowing ourselves to be ruthlessly partisan, ruthlessly illiberal, so that at the end, we can then restore democratic norms. I'm with Dewey on that. I think that, the partly constitutive of the ends when it comes to social action is the means that we employ to get there. So what do we do about it, given that we have to retain and uphold and sustain our commitment to democracy? That's the problem, it seems to me. That latter part seems to me to be the sharp edge of the problem. What do we do about it? I want to go back to the big sort stuff, because I think that is an essential part of the diagnostic story. And I think that, I assume we're going to agree on this too, that this is a good Deweyan insight as well, right? A problem well defined is a problem half solved, he says in his book on logic. It seems to me that getting a slightly more complete diagnostic story is prior to, philosophically, first. It's prior to thinking about what we need to do. We have to figure out what the problem is in order to fully appreciate the range of things that we might do to address it. And I'm glad you brought up the big sort, because I think that the big sort, the Bill Bishop stuff, is a really essential part of our diagnostic story. So the big sort phenomenon, as you had laid it out, is just that our social spaces, ordinary social spaces, from our neighborhoods, it's not only blue state, red state stuff, it is partly that, our neighborhoods, our districts, our occupations, our school systems. Your dentist is very likely to be liberal. Your surgeon is very likely to be conservative, for example. So it goes right down to sort of occupations have become, over the past now 40 years, right? Over the past now 40, 50 years, have become more segregated according to partisan identity. It used to be that certain of these sites of social interaction were segregated according to ethnic identity, religious identity, economic circumstance, so on and so forth. It turns out now that the main driver of the sorting of social spaces, so that people in their everyday activities are more and more likely to encounter only people who are just like themselves. The main driver of that now is partisan identity. And by the way, you can see this in lots of cases. Just think about the difference between walking into a Starbucks and walking into a Dunkin Donuts. Starbucks, I don't have to tell our listeners, I'm sure, Starbucks clientele skews heavily liberal. Across the country, by the way, heavily liberal, even in places that are heavily conservative, right? Even in places where you've got a Dunkin Donuts and a Starbucks right next to each other. The clientele is heavily liberal. Dunkin Donuts goes the other way. Clientele is heavily conservative. You could tell this by the interior of these places, by the way. What does the inside of a Starbucks look like? It's clearly selling coffee to people who value travel, who see themselves as cosmopolitans, who like the illusion of speaking a foreign language, who dream of spending an afternoon at a cafe in Paris, right? Starbucks is selling its coffee to a particular clientele that understands themselves in a particular way. Turns out that in the United States, if you're liberal, you're far more likely to have a passport. You're far more likely to travel outside the country. And so you see, oh, Starbucks is marketing its product to a particular kind of person. That particular kind of person correlates with liberal political views. Do you happen to know the now, I think, 25 years standing marketing slogan of Dunkin Donuts?
Oh, geez, no, I don't. Although I try
America
to avoid
runs
place.
on Dunkin.
Oh, of course.
Now, think about that's interesting, right? That's an interesting contrast with Starbucks. America runs on Dunkin. What are their products doing? Selling coffee and carbohydrates to people who need to stay awake, either because they're going to work or they're coming home from work. It's clearly, and their drinks don't have foreign, they might have strange names. They don't sound foreign, right? You have large, you small, medium, extra large, right? You don't have venti, and you don't have to speak a fake foreign language to order what you want at Dunkin Donuts. Turns out that, let me put it this way, turns out that all of the, I think, well-placed concerns about the causal connections between social media feeds, online spaces, and extremification. We're familiar with these echo chamber kinds of arguments from lots of philosophers who've been writing about it for a long time, Cass Sunstein and others, right? The problem with the internet is that it gives us control over, antecedent control over who we interact with, what messages we hear, and that's bad for us cognitively because it makes us more extreme. Turns out that's a really well-established psychological phenomenon. louder and louder echoes of your own voice turn you into a more extreme advocate, actually extremify the thing that you believe. You become more strident, more doctrinal, more dogmatic, less able to hear any criticisms as well-intentioned, so on and so forth. Turns out that the big sorting stuff adds, this is why it's so crucial. However formidable, however powerful you think those online echo chambers arguments are for cautioning us about preserving our democratic capacities in these new technological spaces, however formidable you think those are, turns out that our ordinary physical environments are structured in the same ways. That is, chance of running into somebody who voted. Right. The chances of going and standing next to somebody online for a cup of coffee and having a chance encounter with somebody who didn't vote for the guy you voted for are dwindling.